The crystal chandelier above the dining table catches the afternoon light, sending fractured rainbows across the mahogany surface where I polish away invisible dust. My hands move in practice circles, the same motion I've made for 60 years. Of keeping house. The cloth whispers against the wood, a sound so familiar it's become the rhythm of my breathing. But today, something else breaks through that quiet. Voices from the garden, sharp with secrets. I pause, my weathered fingers still against the table's edge. Through the French doors, I see them. My daughter-in-law Catherine and a man I don't recognize, their heads bent close like conspirators. The words drift through the glass, carried on the summer breeze that stirs the white curtains. I only married him for 10 million, Catherine says, her voice light as if discussing the weather. The man laughs, low and knowing. My heart stumbles, then finds its rhythm again. Heavier now, the cloth falls from my hands to the floor. I stand frozen, watching Catherine toss her perfectly styled hair, watching her lean closer to this stranger. She wears the diamond necklace my son gave her for their anniversary, the one that cost more than most people earn in a year. The afternoon sun makes it sparkle against her throat, each facet catching light like her casual cruelty catches in my chest. I think of David, my son, working late again at the office, believing his wife loves him. I bend to retrieve the fallen cloth, my knees protesting with the familiar ache of 73 years. When I straighten, Catherine has turned slightly, and I see her eyes find mine through the glass. For a moment, we stare at each other across the space that separates truth from deception. Her smile doesn't waver, doesn't even flicker. If anything, it grows wider, more predatory. She knows I heard. She doesn't care. The stranger follows her gaze to where I stand, and I see him whisper something that makes Catherine laugh again. They both look at me now, this old woman with her cleaning cloth and her breaking heart. I am furniture to them, as permanent and silent as the mahogany table beneath my hands. But furniture, I think as I turn away from their stares, can be more valuable than people imagine. Sometimes the most overlooked pieces hold the greatest treasures within. Sleep becomes a stranger after that afternoon. I lie in my narrow bed in the small room they've given me, the maid's quarters, really, though no one calls it that, and stare at the ceiling where shadows dance like secrets. The house settles around me with creaks and sighs, the sounds of a home breathing through the night. But I feel like I'm drowning in the air, suffocating on words I cannot speak. The next morning brings its familiar routine. I rise at 5:30, as I have for decades, and pad through the silent house in my worn slippers. The kitchen welcomes me with its stainless steel surfaces and granite countertops, Catherine's choices, all of them, cold and beautiful and unforgiving. I make coffee in the machine that costs more than my monthly social security check, listening to it gurgle and hiss. The sound reminds me of the way Catherine laughed yesterday, mechanical and sharp. David comes down at 7. As always, his tie slightly crooked, his briefcase heavy with the weight of providing for a family that includes a woman who married him for money. I want to reach out and straighten that tie, to smooth the worry lines from his forehead, to tell him what I heard. Instead, I pour his coffee into the blue mug I bought him 20 years ago, the one Catherine always tries to throw away during her decluttering phases. "Thanks, Mom," he says, kissing my cheek with distracted affection. Catherine appears at 7:15, immaculate in her silk blouse and designer jeans. She moves through the kitchen like a queen surveying her domain, touching nothing but commanding everything. "Margaret," she says to me, her voice honey smooth, "I need you to take my car to the dealer today for its service. I'm meeting some friends for lunch." She doesn't ask. She never asks. The keys land on the counter with a metallic chime that sounds like chains. After they leave David to his office, Catherine to whatever web she weaves with her friends, I sit at the kitchen island with my own coffee cooling in a chipped mug. The house expands around me, rooms full of expensive furniture and empty of warmth. I think about the woman I used to be, before arthritis bent my shoulders and time softened my voice. There was strength in these hands once, purpose in these steps. But now I am the keeper of secrets, the guardian of silences, invisible in my own son's home. The photo album sits in my lap like a sleeping cat, heavy with memories I rarely disturb. But today, with the afternoon light slanting through my bedroom window, I need to remember who I was before I became the woman who cleans other people's tables and swallows other people's secrets. My fingers, gnarled now but still steady, turn the pages with reverence for the past. There I am at 25, standing beside a military jeep in my crisp army uniform, my hair pinned back beneath my cap. Lieutenant Margaret Hayes, they called me then, never just Margaret, never dismissed with a casual wave of the hand. The woman in the photograph has clear eyes and shoulders that have never learned to bow. She managed supply chains for 3 bases, commanded respect from colonels twice her age, made decisions that affected thousands of lives. I trace her face with one finger, surprised by how young she looks, how certain. The next page shows me at 30, shaking hands with a congressman at the dedication of the Veterans Hospital I helped design. My civilian clothes are sharp, professional, the uniform of a woman who built things that mattered. After the Army, I worked for the Department of Veterans Affairs for 35 years, rising through ranks that didn't want to promote women. I wrote policies that changed how we care for wounded soldiers, supervised budgets larger than small cities, earned commendations that still hang in a box somewhere in this house. I turned to a page near the end. A newspaper clipping yellowed with H. The headline reads, "Local woman receives Federal Service Award for Lifetime Achievement." The photo shows me at 65, just retired, holding a plaque and smiling the smile of someone who has accomplished something worthwhile. Behind me in the photograph, barely visible, stands a young David, proud of his mother, not yet married. To a woman who would reduce her to a servant in her own son's house, the album closes with a soft thump that sounds like a door shutting. I sit in the gathering dusk, surrounded by the evidence of a life lived with purpose and dignity. Tomorrow I will take Catherine's car to be serviced, will fold her laundry and prepare her meals, will pretend not to notice when she brings her stranger to the house while David works late. But tonight, in this room with these memories, I remembered that I am not just the old woman who keeps their secrets. I am Margaret Hayes, and I have weathered storms they cannot imagine. The safety deposit box key feels cold between my fingers as I drive Catherine's pristine Mercedes through downtown traffic. She expects me back by noon with her service car, but some errands cannot wait for convenient timing. The bank where I've done business for 40 years welcomes me with familiar faces and genuine smiles here. I am still Mrs. Hayes, valued customer, not invisible furniture in someone else's home. The vault below ground hums with fluorescent lighting and climate control, preserving treasures behind steel doors. Box 347 has been mine for 30 years, holding documents I hoped never to need but was too wise to discard. The metal drawer slides open with a whisper, revealing files organized with military precision. Birth certificates, property deeds, stock, portfolios, insurance policies, the paper trail of a life lived with foresight and responsibility. I lift out the real estate folder first, its contents worth more than Catherine could imagine. The lake house in Vermont, purchased 40 years ago for a song and now worth millions according to the latest appraisal. The commercial property downtown, bought when David was in college, now home to 3 thriving businesses that pay rent to an LLC Catherine has never heard of. The investment accounts, grown fat and sleek through decades of careful management and compound interest. My son thinks I live on Social Security and his charity. He has no idea his mother could buy his house twice over without straining her budget. Next comes the folder marked professional records, commendations from 4-star generals, letters from senators thanking me for my service, documentation of security clearances that haven't expired despite my retirement. There's the patent for the logistics software I developed, still generating royalties after 15 years. There's correspondence with the foundation I established for women veterans, my signature worth more than Catherine's spending allowance. These papers tell the story of Margaret Hayes, the woman who existed before she became grandmother, helper, invisible keeper of other people's homes. The final folder contains more recent documents, private investigator reports, financial records, photographs taken with telephoto lenses. Because a woman who spent decades in military intelligence doesn't ignore suspicious behavior in her own home. I know about Catherine's shopping trips that last 6 hours and produce no packages. I know about her book club meetings in hotel bars. I know about the men from the garden, identified now as Marcus Webb, real estate developer with expensive tastes and wandering hands. The files remember everything, even when the family chooses to see nothing. You're so lucky to have such a devoted mother-in-law, Catherine's friend Sandra gushes across the dinner table, her voice dripping with the kind of admiration that makes Catherine straighten in her chair like a cat being stroked. I serve the roast I spent 3 hours preparing, my hands steady as I place perfect portions on china that Catherine chose, but I maintain. The dinner party was her idea. 6 couples who believe they're witnessing domestic bliss instead of elaborate theater. David beams from the head of the table, playing his role as loving husband and grateful son. Mom's amazing, he says, raising his wine glass in my direction. I don't know what we'd do without her. The guests murmur agreement while Catherine's smile grows sharper, more brittle. She reaches over and pats my hand with condescending affection, her diamond wedding ring catching the light like a warning. Margaret's such a help, Catherine purrs, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. She insists on cooking and cleaning. We can't stop her. She says it gives her a purpose. The way she says purpose makes it sound like a quaint delusion, something to be pitied rather than respected. The guests nod sympathetically, seeing an old woman clinging to usefulness rather than a veteran who commanded respect from generals and designed systems that saved lives. I retreat to the kitchen to serve dessert, listening to their laughter through the swinging door. They discuss vacation plans and stock options, charity galas and private schools for children not yet born. Catherine mentions her charity work, a ladies' auxiliary that meets monthly for lunch, and calls it philanthropy. She doesn't know I've researched her so-called causes, discovered that less than 10% of their fundraising actually reaches the intended recipients. She raises more money in a day than they donate in a year. When I return with the chocolate torte, the conversation has shifted to family dynamics. It must be so rewarding, someone says to Catherine, having such a close relationship with your mother-in-law. So many women struggle with that dynamic. Catherine's laugh tinkles like breaking glass. Oh, Margaret's practically invisible around here. Good invisible. Of course, she just blends into the background, taking care of everything, without being asked. It's perfect, really. The word invisible hangs in the air like smoke, stinging my eyes, burning my throat. But I smile and serve dessert, the perfect backdrop to their perfect evening, counting the days until my own performance begins. The estate attorney's office occupies the top floor of a glass tower downtown, its windows offering views that stretch to the horizon. James Whitfield has handled my legal affairs for 15 years, since before David married Catherine, since before I became invisible in my own family. He's the kind of lawyer who remembers birthdays and asks about grandchildren, who treats elderly widows like valuable clients rather than inconvenient obligations. Mrs. Hayes, he says, settling behind his mahogany desk with the file I requested. I have to say, these changes you're proposing are quite comprehensive. His silver eyebrows raise slightly as he flips through documents that represent months of careful planning. Trust restructures, property transfers, beneficiary changes, the legal architecture for a life lived on my own terms. At 73, I'm redesigning my existence with the same precision I once brought to military logistics. The new will reflect reality instead of wishful thinking. David inherits what he's earned through genuine love and respect, a generous but not overwhelming sum that won't change his life but will secure his children's education. Catherine receives exactly what she married him for, Nothing. Her name appears nowhere in the documents, erased as completely as she has erased my dignity. The bulk of my estate flows to causes that matter: veterans programs, women's shelters, educational foundations that will outlast family drama. The trust for your son is interesting, Whitfield notes, adjusting his glasses. Monthly distributions that increase if he meets certain conditions: family therapy attendance, volunteer work, demonstrated respect for elders. It's like you're incentivizing personal growth. Exactly right. David isn't a bad man, just a blind one. The trust will fund his awakening, reward his evolution from enabler to advocate. Money, I've learned, can teach lessons that words cannot. We spend 2 hours signing documents, witnessing signatures, filing papers that will change everything while changing nothing immediately. The beauty of careful planning is its invisibility: restructuring power while appearing powerless, preparing for war while serving tea. As I leave Whitfield's office, the afternoon sun casts long shadows across the city. Tonight I'll return to Catherine's kitchen to prepare dinner, but tomorrow's menu is entirely my own choosing. The revolution begins with paperwork, as all the best ones do. Catherine's behavior grows bolder as the weeks pass, like a child testing boundaries that never appear. She brings Marcus to the house now in broad daylight, no longer content with garden conspiracies and careful timing. Today I served them lunch on the patio: iced tea in crystal glasses, cucumber sandwiches arranged on the good china, while they discuss their future as if I'm deaf as well as invisible. The property in Aspen is perfect, Marcus says, his voice carrying the casual arrogance of inherited wealth. Remote enough for privacy, large enough for entertaining. Your husband would love it there eventually. They laugh at the joke I'm not supposed to understand. The implication that David is temporary, expendable, useful only until the divorce lawyers finish dividing his assets. Catherine's wedding ring catches the sunlight as she traces patterns on the glass table. 7 years, Catherine uses, as if calculating compound interest. That's what my lawyer says I need for maximum settlement in the state. 7 years of marriage, and I can take half of everything plus alimony. She doesn't mention that David's everything is largely theoretical: a comfortable salary that barely covers their extravagant lifestyle, a house mortgaged to the windows, investments that exist more on paper than in reality. She's planned her exit strategy around assets that are more mirage than substance. I refill their glasses with hands that don't tremble, face that doesn't betray recognition. They see an old woman performing service, not a strategist gathering intelligence. Marcus has a tell when he lies. His left eye twitches slightly, barely noticeable unless you've spent decades reading people across negotiation tables and command centers. Catherine's tell is different. She touches her throat when she's nervous, fingers seeking the security of expensive jewelry. Both tells are in constant motion today. That evening, David comes home to find Catherine planning a weekend trip to visit her sister. Margaret can manage things here, she says, not asking, never asking. She kisses his cheek with lips that taste of lies, and he smiles like a man who still believes in fairy tales. I watch from the kitchen doorway as she heads upstairs to pack, probably texting Marcus about mountain retreats and 7-year plans. The storm she's brewing will break soon, but not in the direction she expects. Some winds change course without warning, leaving forecasters wondering how they read the signs so wrong. The house fills with voices I haven't heard in years: my former colleagues from the Veterans Administration, military friends who still call me Lieutenant, professionals who knew Margaret Hayes before she became invisible. David stands in the living room looking bewildered as men and women in expensive suits treat his mother like the accomplished person she actually is. Catherine hovers near the kitchen door, her face pale beneath carefully applied makeup, finally sensing that something has shifted in the foundation of her world. The Margaret Hayes Foundation for Women Veterans was brilliant, says General Patricia Morrison, my former commanding officer who now runs her own defense contracting firm. The residential program you designed has helped thousands transition to civilian careers. The president himself signed the commendation letter. She hands David a framed citation he's never seen, his mother's name embossed in gold below the presidential seal. His hands shake slightly as he reads accomplishments that dwarf his own resume. Catherine steps forward, extending her hand with practiced social grace, but General Morrison barely acknowledges her presence. Military people recognize substance over surface, value service over shopping. David, the general continues, your mother never mentioned her security clearance is still active. The consulting work she's done for Homeland Security these past 5 years, well, let's just say, several senators owe their careers to her policy recommendations. The room grows quiet as the implications settle like dust after an explosion. Consulting work. David's voice cracks slightly. He turns to look at me, really look, perhaps for the first time in years. I'm still wearing my simple house dress and sensible shoes, still the woman who serves his coffee and folds his laundry. But now he's seeing something else, some shadow of the person I was before I became background furniture in his life. Mom, why didn't you ever tell me? I smile the way I used to smile at young soldiers who finally understood a complex operation. You never asked, sweetheart. The words are gentle, without accusation, but they land like artillery in the silence. Catherine's face has gone white as bone china, all her certainties cracking like ice in spring. She reaches for David's arm, but he steps away, still staring at the framed commendation, still reading about a mother he never bothered to know. The game has changed, and she's just realized she never knew the rules. The private investigator's report covers the coffee table like a map of betrayal, photographs and documents spread across the surface with clinical precision. David sits frozen in his chair, staring at images of his wife with another man, bank records showing money transferred to accounts he's never seen, hotel receipts that correspond to days she claimed to be visiting her fictional sixth sister. Catherine stands behind him, one hand gripping the back of his chair, her knuckles wide as her face. 10 million, I say quietly, setting down my teacup with barely a whisper against the saucer. That's what you told Marcus you married him for. But David doesn't have 10 million, Catherine. He never did. I reach for another folder, this one containing financial records that paint a clearer picture than her fantasies. His salary is comfortable but not wealthy. The house has 2 mortgages. His retirement account is healthy but hardly rich man money. You were planning to divorce a millionaire, but you married a man who works for a living. Catherine's voice, when it comes, sounds like paper tearing. You don't understand the whole conversation. You misheard, but I'm already shaking my head, already reaching for the small recording device that's been my insurance policy for weeks. Her own voice fills the room, crystal clear, confessing to loveless marriage and calculated theft. Marcus's laughter follows, then detailed discussions of property division and asset hiding that would interest a prosecutor as much as a divorce attorney. The irony, I continue, my voice steady as a judge pronouncing sentence, is that you've been living with actual wealth all along, just not David's. I slide the real estate portfolio across the table, property values and investment statements that make Catherine's shopping budget look like pocket change. This house you've redecorated so enthusiastically, I bought it 15 years ago and put it in David's name as a wedding gift. The car you drive, the vacations you take, the lifestyle you think you've earned, all subsidized by the old woman you treat like hired help. David looks up from the papers, his face cycling through confusion, hurt, and something approaching awe. Mom, you own all this? Why did you let us think? Because I wanted to see what kind of man you'd become without money corrupting the equation. What kind of woman he'd choose when she thought there was nothing to gain but love. I look at Catherine, who seems to be shrinking into herself like expensive fabric in hot water. Unfortunately, the experiment revealed more about her character than I hoped, and perhaps less about yours than I feared. The room settles into silence, broken only by the tick of the grandfather clock Catherine always complained was too loud. Outside, Evening approaches with its promise of new beginnings and closed chapters. Justice, I've learned, isn't about revenge or punishment, it's about truth finally finding its voice after years of enforced silence. The scales balance not through cruelty but through clarity, not through anger but through the simple, devastating power of facts presented without malice but with absolute precision. The lake house in Vermont welcomes me home like an old friend. Its wraparound porch and weathered shingles unchanged despite years of neglect. David helped me move my belongings last month, his face still shell-shocked by revelations that continue unfolding like a complex military operation with multiple phases. Catherine filed for divorce within a week, but her lawyer quickly discovered that community property laws don't apply to assets that were never David's to begin with. She left with what she brought to the marriage: expensive clothes, a luxury car lease, and hard-won knowledge about the dangers of underestimating quiet women. My morning routine here follows rhythms I establish rather than routines imposed by other people's expectations. I rise when I choose, make coffee in my favorite mug, sit on the porch watching mist rise from water that belongs to me. The silence is different here, not the oppressive quiet of swallowed words and hidden resentment, but the peaceful hush of a life lived on my own terms. Birds call to each other across the lake. Their voice is the only conversation I need to hear. David visits every few weeks, bringing his children and genuine curiosity about the grandmother they're finally allowed to know. They listen wide-eyed to stories about my military service, fascinated by this version of me that their mother never mentioned in her rush to make me invisible. Grandma was a real soldier, my grandson tells his friends, and I smile because being past tense in their world means being fully present in my own. The foundation work continues from here. Board meetings conducted via video conference. Site visits when I choose to travel. My signature on checks means more now that it's attached to freedom rather than servitude. Young women veterans come to stay in the guest house sometimes, working through their own transitions from service to civilian life. I recognize the look in their eyes, the confusion of being valued one day and dismissed the next, the struggle to remember who you are beneath who others expect you to become. This morning's mail brings a letter from Marcus Webb's wife, thanking me for the photographs and financial records that explained her husband's extended business trips and mysterious expenses. She's filed for divorce too, armed with evidence that ensures she won't make Catherine's mistake of overestimating available assets. The lake reflects sky like a mirror, showing me a woman who looks familiar: strong shoulders, clear eyes, hands that remember their own power. Margaret Hayes, visible at last, accountable to no one but herself and the truth that finally found its voice. The revolution is complete, quiet as dawn, permanent as morning light on water that remembers every storm it has survived. If you've ever felt invisible in your own life, if you've swallowed words that needed speaking, if you've been underestimated by people who should know better, this story is for you. Sometimes the greatest strength lies not in dramatic confrontation but in the quiet dignity of truth finally spoken. Sometimes justice arrives not with thunder but with the gentle, irresistible power of facts presented at exactly the right moment. What would you do if you discovered someone married your child for money that doesn't exist? How would you handle betrayal from someone you welcomed into your family? Share your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about the hidden strength of those who are too often overlooked. Because every invisible person has a story worth telling, and every quiet voice deserves to be heard.